Imagine a winter evening when, in the silence of the house, it seems as if someone else is nearby. The light creaking of floorboards, a barely perceptible scent of familiar perfume, or the feeling of someone's gaze. These moments are familiar to many. Dear viewers, each of us has pondered at least once in our lives what happens to us after our earthly journey ends. What awaits our souls? Where do they go? And do they always understand that they have left the material world? Barbara's story from Pennsylvania will not leave anyone indifferent. After 42 years of marriage, her husband Frank passed away from a heart attack. This happened suddenly. One morning he was having coffee on the porch, and by lunchtime he was gone. However, for Barbara, their relationship did not end there. Every morning she continued to prepare 2 cups of coffee because she felt Frank's presence. Familiar footsteps could be heard at night in their bedroom, and his favorite rocking chair sometimes began to move for no apparent reason. I know many think I'm just an old crazy woman, Barbara told her friends, but Frank is still here. He just doesn't understand what happened. There are thousands of similar stories. A loving mother who continues to appear in her children's dreams, warning them of dangers. An old teacher whose silhouette students still see in the school windows. A grandmother whose footsteps are heard in the kitchen when the whole family gathers around the holiday table. These stories share one thing in common: the souls that remain between worlds. Souls that, for some reason, have not realized their transition. And today, we will discuss why this happens and what it means for us, the living. Perhaps each of you has your own story of meeting the invisible, your own sensation of the presence of those who are no longer physically with us. These experiences are not merely flights of imagination. They reflect the deep connection between worlds, which science is only beginning to study, while spiritual practices have known about it for millennia. Many spiritual teachings in ancient cultures speak of the soul continuing to exist in another dimension after the death of the body. However, this transition does not always occur smoothly. Sometimes souls linger in an intermediate state, unaware that their earthly journey has ended. Why do some souls not realize they have died? This question becomes particularly important for those who have encountered inexplicable phenomena following the departure of loved ones. Mediums, parapsychologists, and even some psychiatrists describe cases where the deceased continue to behave as if they are still alive. Dr. Samuel Harris, who has studied paranormal phenomena for over 30 years, explains, imagine that you have been convinced of a certain reality your whole life, and then suddenly that reality changes. Some souls need time to accept this new truth. In the modern world, where the scientific approach dominates, conversations about souls are often met with skepticism. Nevertheless, research into near-death experiences shows remarkable results. People who have experienced clinical death describe similar sensations: a tunnel of light, encounters with deceased relatives, a sense of peace and love. But what if the transition process is interrupted? What if the soul is lost or refuses to accept the new reality? Psychologist Jennifer Thompson believes that our consciousness can exist separately from the body, and at the moment of death, full awareness of what has occurred does not always happen. It's like a dream from which it is hard to wake up. Some souls seem to get stuck in a repetitive script, not realizing that the film of their life has already ended, she says. For relatives and loved ones feeling the presence of the deceased, it is important to understand that these phenomena are not merely flights of fancy or manifestations of grief. This can be a real interaction with a soul that is still nearby, not fully aware of its transition. Understanding the reasons for such a state can help both the living and the dead find peace. Now let's consider what factors may prevent a soul from realizing its new state, and why some connections do not sever with the death of the body. Sudden death often causes the soul to not have the time to comprehend what has happened. Imagine a person who, in the morning, was getting ready for work, making plans for the weekend, thinking about an upcoming vacation, only to have their life abruptly cut short in an accident. The psychological mechanism of denial that operates during life may continue to function after death. The story of Robert from Chicago became known through several independent testimonies. This 45-year-old financial analyst died in a car accident on the way to work. Colleagues, unaware of the tragedy, reported seeing his silhouette in the office in the days following the funeral. The building guard claimed that security cameras recorded movement in Robert's office, even though no one was physically present. And his wife, Carol, once received a call from her husband's work number. The line was silent, but the caller ID displayed the familiar number. Stuck souls is how those who continue to follow familiar routes and perform everyday actions after physical death are often referred to. They seem to fall into a time loop, not understanding that their reality has changed. This is especially common for those whose death was traumatic, sudden, or occurred during sleep. Dr. Michael Newton, a regression hypnotherapist, wrote in his studies about confused souls that cannot accept the fact of their death for some time. There is a period of adaptation, he explained. Some souls need help from spiritual guides or already deceased relatives to realize their new state. Denial is the first stage of acceptance of loss, described by psychologist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. For the living, this process usually takes weeks or months. But what if time flows differently in the spiritual dimension? What if for a soul, the denial can last for years in earthly terms? This can explain cases where the presence of the deceased is felt long after their departure. The soul remains in a familiar environment, interacting with loved ones, not understanding why they do not see or respond to it. These are not ghosts from horror movies. They are lost souls needing recognition and acceptance. A strong attachment to the material world is another common reason why souls cannot leave the earthly plane. We often do not realize how deeply rooted we are in our daily lives, in the things that surround us, in the places we call home. For some people, this connection is so strong that even death cannot sever it. Elizabeth, a literature teacher from Boston, lived in her Victorian house for over 50 years. She collected rare books, kept diaries, and wrote letters she never sent. After her death, relatives decided to sell the house but encountered inexplicable phenomena. The new owners noticed that books moved from place to place and that the light in the study would turn on at night. The situation changed only after a box containing Elizabeth's letters was discovered during renovations. Her niece Diana read them and published them as a collection of essays. It was then that the strange occurrences in the house ceased. Sometimes souls need to see that their unfinished business has found a continuation, explains paranormal specialist James Wilson. Only then can they let go of their attachments and move on. Property, home, personal belongings can act as anchors for the soul. Antique family heirlooms, passed down through generations, often become a connecting link between worlds. Collectors who did not have time to complete their collections, business people whose affairs remain unattended, authors of unfinished works. All of them risk becoming tied to the earthly world due to a sense of incompleteness. Interestingly, different cultures have rituals aimed specifically at severing these material ties. In some traditions, a deceased person's personal belongings are burned or buried with them. In others, the property is given to those in need. These actions symbolize the freeing of the soul from earthly attachments. Thomas, a successful architect from San Francisco, suddenly died from a stroke, having not completed the city library project. Employees at his firm reported that the blueprints continued to change, and new details appeared on the computer. When the library was built according to his final sketches, the phenomena ceased. It was as if Thomas's soul needed to complete his most significant work in life. Fear of judgment or punishment after death can become a powerful factor, keeping a soul from realizing its new state. Religious beliefs about heaven and hell, about retribution for sins, are deeply rooted in the consciousness of many people. For those who have lived their lives fearing divine judgment or feeling guilty, the moment of realization of death can be so frightening that the soul instinctively avoids this reality. Pastor William, from a small community in Tennessee, preached of the Last Judgment and hellfire every Sunday for 40 years. He was strict with his parishioners, but even stricter with himself. Few knew that behind the facade of righteousness lay secret sins he could not confess even in confession. After his death from cancer, strange things began happening in the church. Candles lit themselves, and whispers emanated from the empty confessional. Many parishioners claimed to have seen the pastor's silhouette praying at the altar late at night. A soul burdened by guilt may fear encountering higher powers, explains theologian Amanda Becker. In such cases, it seems to hide in familiar places, clinging to earthly reality as a refuge from inevitable judgment. Various cultures have their own concepts of a posthumous judgment. The ancient Egyptians believed that a deceased person's heart was weighed against the feather of truth. In some Christian traditions, there is talk of a detailed review of a person's entire life. Hinduism and Buddhism teach about karma and its influence on the next reincarnation. These beliefs can create powerful psychological barriers for a soul not ready to confront the consequences of its earthly actions. Mark, a former businessman from Detroit, amassed a fortune through dubious deals, ruining many competitors. After dying from a heart attack, his presence was felt in the company office and in the homes of people he had harmed. The phenomena ceased only after his heirs established a charity fund to help small businesses and compensated those harmed by Mark's actions. Researchers of paranormal phenomena note that fear of judgment often manifests in the behavior of restless souls. They may avoid religious symbols, not appear in sacred places, or conversely, seek refuge in churches and cemeteries, as if hoping for forgiveness or a delay of the inevitable. Caring for loved ones and feelings of guilt toward them are perhaps the most poignant and understandable reasons for which souls linger in the earthly realm. Maternal love, paternal responsibility, spousal devotion. These feelings do not vanish at the moment of physical death, especially if a person departed suddenly without the chance to say goodbye, express their feelings, or complete important matters related to the well-being of their family. The story of Martha from Philadelphia became well known thanks to her daughter Sarah and several witnesses. Martha died from complications after pneumonia when Sarah was only 22 years old. The girl was just beginning her independent life, experiencing a breakup with her boyfriend and feeling lost. For several years after her mother's death, Sarah and her friends regularly noticed inexplicable occurrences. Martha's favorite flowers appeared on the doorstep. The phone rang exactly when Sarah was feeling particularly low, and once, when the girl nearly got into an accident, she felt someone sharply tug the steering wheel. Mom always said she would be there until I found my happiness, Sarah recounted, and she kept her promise. Interestingly, after Sarah met her future husband and found stability, the phenomena gradually ceased. It was as if, satisfied that her daughter was okay, Martha's soul could finally move on. Psychologist Richard Davis explains, the parental instinct to protect can be so strong that it transcends even the boundary between life and death, especially if a parent feels that their child, regardless of being 5 or 50, is in danger or going through a difficult time. Equally strong anchors can be unspoken words of love, unfulfilled promises, or unresolved conflicts. David, a war veteran, had not spoken to his son for years due to political disagreements. He died of cancer without reconciling. In the months following the funeral, his son received strange letters with no return address, containing fragments of memories that only his father could know. The phenomena ceased after the son visited his father's grave and spent several hours talking and crying, almost as if that was the conversation that had not occurred during David's life. Unexpressed love, guilt, unresolved conflicts, all of these emotional connections can keep souls near the living, preventing them from fully realizing and accepting their transition. Understanding the reasons why a soul may not realize its death naturally leads to the question, how can we, the living, help them? Specialists in spiritual practices and mediums offer several approaches that can ease a soul's transition and help it free itself from earthly attachments. It is essential to start by acknowledging the phenomenon itself. If you feel the presence of a deceased loved one, do not dismiss that experience or attribute it to imagination. Mary Ann, a professional medium from Boston with 30 years of experience, advises, talk to them. Gently and lovingly explain that they no longer belong to this world. Tell them that light and peace await them, and that you will manage without them. Farewell rituals exist in all cultures for a reason. They help the living come to terms with the loss and help the deceased realize their transition. If, for some reason, a proper farewell did not take place, for instance, if the death was sudden or occurred far from home, you can hold a personal ceremony. Eleanor, who lost her husband Henry while he was on a business trip, recounts, I gathered all his favorite things, photographs, turned on his favorite music, and just talked to him for several hours. I said everything I didn't get to say, and I felt the weight lifting, both from me and, it seems, from him. Forgiveness is another powerful tool for freeing a soul. If there are resentments, unfulfilled promises, or feelings of guilt between you, express this aloud, or write a letter that can be burned or left at the grave. Psychotherapist Jonathan Brown explains, the act of forgiveness frees both parties, both the one who forgives and the one who needs forgiveness. For souls tied to material objects, it can be helpful to organize their affairs or complete what they started, passing on valuable items to those who will appreciate them, publishing unfinished works, fulfilling promised commitments. All of these can signal to the soul that its earthly affairs have been properly concluded. In some cases, professional help may be required. A spiritual advisor, medium, or clergyman experienced in such matters. They can conduct special rituals aimed at freeing the soul and assisting it in realizing its new state. Svetlana, a consultant on spiritual matters, emphasizes, it's important to act from love, not fear. These souls don't want to frighten or harm. They are just lost and need direction. Our task is to help them find their way with respect and love. Ultimately, all souls find their way to the light. Even those temporarily lingering in an intermediate state will eventually realize their true nature and accept the transition. This thought should bring comfort to those who worry about their departed loved ones. Spiritual teachings from different cultures converge on one point. Love is the most powerful force, transcending even the boundary between life and death. Our bond with those we love does not sever with the last breath. It transforms, takes on a new form, but never completely disappears. Joseph, who lost his wife Catherine after 50 years of marriage, shares, in the first months, I constantly felt her presence, found her hair on the pillow, heard her voice. Gradually, these phenomena became less frequent, but did not disappear entirely. Now, I understand that it was her love helping me through the hardest time. When I learned to live on, it was as if she felt it and could move forward in her journey. It is important to remember that our grief, excessive attachment, or inability to let go can keep the souls of our loved ones near us, hindering their progress. Paradoxically, sometimes the highest expression of love is the ability to say, go in peace, and truly let go. For those who have lost loved ones, there is a comforting thought. Death is not the end, but merely a transition to another form of existence. Souls that temporarily do not realize their transition eventually find understanding and peace, and our love and cherished memories of them become a bridge between worlds. Professor of theology Robert Anderson says, in all religious traditions, there is the idea that death is a door, not a wall. What we call ghosts or restless souls are simply travelers lingering at the threshold. But sooner or later, all will cross this line. Keep a bright memory of those who have left. Speak of them. Recall happy moments. Tell stories to the younger generation. Such living remembrance is more valuable than sorrow and despair. It nourishes not only us, but also the souls of those who continue their journey beyond our understanding. Remember, love never dies. It merely takes on a new form, becoming an invisible thread that connects hearts across space, time, and dimensions. And someday we will all reunite, where there is neither the pain of separation, nor misunderstanding, nor fear. Only eternal love uniting all souls in the universe. Thank you very much for spending this time with us, delving into the mysteries of the soul and posthumous existence. Your attention and interest in this profound topic are very important to us. We hope this episode has helped you to see the connection between worlds in a new light, and perhaps find comfort in thoughts of your departed loved ones. If you like this material, please support our channel. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with those who might find it useful. Your support helps us create new content about the spiritual aspects of our existence and the mysteries that transcend the material world. Leave comments with your stories and questions. We read each one and take them into account when creating new episodes. See you in the next video. Take care of yourself and your loved ones, on both sides of existence.